The wind came down from the northern ridge, carrying dust, the smell of dry grass, and the ghosts of a long-forgotten rain. The land was wide and golden, a sea of heat and distance, and somewhere in it, a lone ranch house sat with its roof half-mended and its fences broken by time. Clara Hayes stood on the porch of that ranch with her sleeves rolled and her hands raw from work. She'd inherited the land from her father 2 months back, a man whose heart had been as hard as the stones that framed the fields. Most folks in town had laughed when she said she'd keep the place going. A woman alone on the prairie? They'd said. She'll sell by spring. But spring had come and gone, and Clara was still there. The dust, the storms, and the loneliness had tested her, but she hadn't broken. Not yet. She tied her hair back against the wind and looked out toward the empty horizon. The world was quiet except for the rustle of grass and the creak of the old weather vane. And then, faintly, she saw him, just a dark shape riding slow through the shimmer of heat. Traveler, maybe. Or a drifter. He rode with the kind of patience that came from long miles and heavier memories. His horse was lean, his coat dust gray, and his hat pulled low. When he reached the fence line, he stopped and lifted a hand in greeting. "Morning," he said, voice low but steady. Clara nodded, cautious. "You're a long way from town." Got turned around somewhere near the river. Was hoping for water and maybe work. "You any good with horses?" He gave a small, almost weary smile. "I can listen to him. That's half the job, ain't it?" Clara studied him for a moment. Something about his voice reminded her of the land itself, quiet, steady, but strong underneath. "Name's Clara Hayes," she said. "If you're serious about work, you'll find plenty of it here." He dipped his hat. "Eli Ward, ma'am." And just like that, the stranger stayed. By the week's end, he'd mended the broken corral, shod 3 horses, and cleared a section of brush so thick that even the wind had forgotten how to pass through it. He spoke little, but when he did, every word carried weight. At night, Clara sometimes saw him sitting by the barn, polishing his saddle in the lantern light, his face half hidden beneath the brim of his hat. There was something peaceful about him, something unbroken despite the dust and scars that marked him. The other ranch hands watched too, whispering about where he might have come from. The soldier, one guessed. "A runaway," said another. But Clara didn't ask. She knew better than most that not every past needs telling. Still, she found herself noticing the way Eli's eyes softened when he spoke to the horses, or the way he always left an extra cup of coffee waiting on the porch before dawn. One evening, as the sun sank red over the ridge, Clara joined him at the corral. The air was cool, and the horses were restless from the change in weather. "Storm's coming," he murmured, glancing at the dark line on the horizon. Clara nodded. "Seems they always do." He looked at her, then really looked at her. "You don't scare easy." "I can't afford to," she said. "This land doesn't care who breaks first." Eli gave a quiet laugh. "Then maybe it's the right place for both of us." The storm hit 3 nights later. It came howling from the west with lightning that split the sky and wind that tore through the fences. The herd spooked and broke for the flats, hooves thundering through the rain. Clara ran after them, shouting into the dark, mud splashing up her dress. "Clara!" Eli's voice cut through the roar. He was already on horseback, riding hard toward the herd. She followed, heart hammering, until the ground gave way beneath her boots. A flash of pain shot through her ankle as she fell. She tried to rise, but the mud was thick and the storm relentless. Then, just as another bolt of lightning ripped across the plain, Eli appeared beside her, dismounting in one motion. "Can't leave you out here," he said, his voice almost lost to the wind. He pulled her close, wrapping his coat around her shoulders before helping her onto his horse. The coat smelled of rain and leather and dust, everything the West was made of. They rode back through the storm, thunder rolling above them, the world a blur of rain and fear and something new, something wordless that neither dared name. When they reached the barn, Eli lifted her down gently. The coat slipped from her shoulders, heavy with rain, and he caught it before it hit the ground. "Thank you," she said, breathless. "Don't thank me yet," he replied with a faint grin. "Fence is gone. We'll be chasing cattle till morning." But his tone wasn't sharp, it was steady, calm, reassuring. Clara realized then that she hadn't heard anyone speak to her like that in a long time. The next morning dawned quiet and gray. The storm had passed, leaving the earth washed clean. Eli was already in the pasture, fixing what the wind had broken. Clara limped out with a cup of coffee, the air cool on her face. "You didn't have to do all that alone," she said. He looked up from his work, mud streaking his hands. "You'd have done the same." She smiled softly. "That's not the point." "Maybe not," he said, "but it's the truth." They worked side by side for days, mending, rebuilding, coaxing the ranch back to life. The fences stood again, the herd returned, and with each sunrise, the silence between them grew less like distance and more like understanding. Sometimes, when the day was done, they'd sit on the porch and watch the light fade from the land. They didn't need to fill the air with words. The quiet was enough. Still, Clara found herself wanting to know him, to understand the shadows behind his eyes. One night she asked, "Why'd you come this far west?" He hesitated, gaze fixed on the stars. "Used to wear a uniform," he said finally. "Did some things I thought were right. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. But I couldn't live with them anymore." Clara nodded slowly. "And now? Now I just try to build instead of break." The words hung in the cool night air, heavy and honest. She reached out then, placing a hand on his arm, not to comfort, but to acknowledge. To say, "You're not the only one who's trying to start over." By the time autumn came, the land had changed. So had they. The herd was stronger, the fences solid, and the laughter that had once mocked her in town had gone quiet. Folks had stopped saying she'd never last. They started saying that ranch out at Lone Mesa, run by the woman and that quiet man, it's doing fine. One evening, as the first cold wind of the season swept across the prairie, Clara stood outside watching the light fade from the hills. Eli joined her, hands tucked in his coat pockets. "Looks like winter's coming early," he said. "Then we'll meet it early," she replied. He turned to her with that faint, almost shy smile. "You ever think about what comes after all this?" Clara looked toward the horizon. The same endless sky that had once made her feel small now felt like home. "No," she said. "For once, I'm right where I belong." Eli's gaze lingered on her, and in that quiet, the truth settled between them like the calm after a storm. They'd both been broken once, shaped by loss, forged by the same hard land. But they were still standing. When he took her hand, it wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was simple, honest, and sure. The kind of gesture that didn't need words. The wind moved through the grass, soft and low, like a hymn the earth had been saving just for them. That night, the stars came out over Lone Mesa, clear and countless.